Hey guys, Luke here for Valley Community Hospital, doing a quick little training video on the LTV1200 ventilator. This is the ventilator that we currently have in operation in our emergency department and on the floor. So let's jump into this. Alright guys, this video we're going to talk about how to actually operate this vent. So we're going to start with the screen layout. You'll see here the screen is broken down into a few different sections, and it also has, labeled as number 2 on this screen, it's got a set value knob. That is how you actually change the numbers. You rotate the knob. Okay. So the area highlighted in red is where you're going to start all of your ventilator projects. That's where the on button is. That's also the off button. You just have to press it to turn it on. You have to press and hold to turn it off. Then you have the select button for volume and pressure to change between those two modes, and the select button to change between assist control, SIMV CPAP, and NPPV or BiPAP modes. Then, the areas that are now highlighted in red are where you change the actual settings for what is being delivered to the patient. So, everything from breath rate and tidal volume to pressures and oxygen amounts. Okay. This area in red is where all of your alarms are. The 3 main alarms on this system are your high pressure limit, your low pressure limit, and your low minute volume. So with the high pressure limit, I like to set that about 5 to 10 centimeters of water above where I have my limits set at. And with the low pressure, I like to have it 5 to 10 below where I have my pressure set at. We'll go over that when we get into pressures here in a little bit. And then for minute volume, we'll talk about that when we get into settings. And then the last little section is this top area. We have the bar at the top with the numbers of -10 to 100. That's where you can see the pressures that the vent is actually sensing in the circuit. Those pressures should match the pressures that you have set. However, in certain circumstances, they won't, such as when CPR is being performed, in which case you're going to see spikes due to the CPR. Right below that, there is a larger black area. That is actually the screen where you can go into some of the deeper settings, and the select button. All right, so in order to connect the vent to the circuit, it's pretty simple. You really can't mess it up. You take the circuit, it'll have 4 hoses, one really big one that connects down at the bottom, and it'll have this little piece right here in it. That goes into the port on the right-hand side of the vent. Then you're going to want to put a filter right here, which actually should be in the bag hanging off of the vent. But you put a filter here, and then this is your big hose for the circuit. Then these 3 hoses, they each have a different end on them. One doesn't have any connector, and it goes on the piece that doesn't need a connector. One has a male connector, it goes into the female, and one has a female connector, it goes into the male. Like I said, you can't mess it up. All right, so let's talk about how we actually are going to set up our different modes. So we're going to start with the one we're going to use for fully vented patients. So these are your patients that either don't have a spontaneous respiratory drive due to, brain injury or cardiac arrest or whatever, or they're so heavily sedated and or paralyzed that they do not have a respiratory drive. With assist control mode, you can be in either pressure or in volume mode, and we'll go over which one later when we get into settings, but this mode will not allow the patients to take spontaneous breaths. It will just take over their breathing completely. So there's 12 steps, but don't worry, it's not that difficult. All right. So the buttons that you're going to be pressing are actually labeled on here. Obviously, you have to start by turning it on, but the first actual step is you have to press the select button twice to toggle the modes between assist control and SIMV CPAP. It'll start in assist control, so that's already done. And you should see it highlighted right here in assist control mode. Okay. Next, you can switch between your volume and your pressure. Okay. Most respiratory therapists use volume. So yeah, but we'll go over that in a later section. Then you're going to come up here to number 3, and you're going to set your breath rate. You set that by clicking the button, which will then highlight this and dim all of the rest of the numbers. You change your rate, and you click the button again to confirm. Step 4, you're going to set your tidal volume. Step 5, you're going to set your pressure control. This is only if you're on pressure mode here. If you're on volume mode, this number will be grayed out and you won't be able to change it anyways. Then you're going to set your inspiratory time. This is only really super needed in your like COPD patients that you need to have a longer exhalation time. Then you're going to set number 7, your O2 percentage. We're going to start at 100%. Unless the doc says something different, you're going to start at 100%. And then if their SpO2 is 100% on that, you can titrate down until their SpO2 hits the mid-90s. But start at 100%. We don't want to be behind the 8 ball and try to work up to a good SpO2 level. Okay. Then 8. This is sensitivity. This one, you usually set it from 1 to 9. I like to set it at 2. It's not going to be very important in patients without a respiratory drive. This is how it senses when the patient's taking their own breath, basically. All right, then we go over here. We're going to set our high pressure limit. Again, about 5 to 10 above your pressures. Then you're going to set your low pressure limit. Again, 5 to 10 below your pressures you've set. And your low minute volume. And we'll talk about how to calculate what our minute volume should be. And then the final thing you do is you set your PEEP. And we'll go over that in the settings. Once all that's done, you should be ready to hook up to the patient. So now we're going to talk about SIMV mode. This is the mode that I actually like the most for my vented patients because it allows them to take their own breaths. So it will breathe for them at a set amount of times per minute, but if they take extra spontaneous breaths, so say I have this set at 12 breaths a minute, and they're breathing 30 times a minute, it will allow them to breathe that 30 times a minute, and it will just assist them with those breaths. But if they then become apneic for 30 or 60 seconds, it will still breathe 12 times a minute for them so they do not become hypoxic. So this is the mode that I like the most. It tends to make it to where the patients don't fight the vent quite as much. So we start with down here, of course, again, you turn the vent on. You're going to put it into SIMV mode. You do that with this select button. You click it once, and you're going to see that. So when you first start the vent up, it's in assist control mode. When you press this select button once, the SIMV button will blink. The assist control will still be solid. You have to press it again to confirm that you actually want to go to SIMV mode. Now this will be solid and assist control will be off. Okay, then you can change it from pressure or volume. Again, we'll get into that later. Then we set our breath rate. This is the minimum breath rate that the patient will be allowed to breathe. They will be allowed to breathe faster. Okay, then we've got tidal volume. And we calculate that based on our ideal body weight. We'll get into it. We set our pressure control if we're in pressure mode. We set our inspiratory time if needed. We set our pressure support. We set our O2 percentage, our sensitivity limits, and then our PEEP. So it's very similar to setting up in assist control mode. Okay. Then we're going to talk about CPAP mode here real quick. It's pretty simple. So you can run regular old CPAP, continuous positive airway pressure. Now remember, this is for a patient who is breathing. Okay, this is not for a vented patient usually. These vents, so the way that you do it is you set everything up like you normally would. Your PEEP is your big one. You want to set that to whatever you need your PEEP to be at for the CPAP. Usually it starts at 5 and works its way up to 10 to 15. And then you set the breath rate. You turn it all the way up until it's just showing dashes. And that tells it to be on CPAP mode. That's the important part. Okay. Then we've got NPPV mode. This is the part of this vent that most people mess up. NPPV mode is BiPAP. Okay. You don't get to BiPAP by going to the CPAP mode. You get to BiPAP by going to NPPV. It's an older term. It's usually called NIPPV now, non-invasive positive pressure ventilation. So to get there, it's with this number 1 select button here. It starts in assist control mode. You have to click it twice to get to SIMV. You click it twice more to get over to NPPV. So it is the 3rd mode. Okay. Once you do that, on this screen up here, it's going to say set IPAP. And you set that right here at number 2 under pressure support. And on these vents, unlike some vents, but on these vents, in order to determine what their pressures are going to be, you have to do a little bit of math. It's pretty simple. Okay. When the patient breathes in, they will get the total combined pressures of the PEEP and the pressure support, or IPAP. When they breathe out, they will get the pressure of the PEEP. Okay, that will be your EPAP. So for number 2 here, you adjust the IPAP shown in the pressure support window, and then you press the button to confirm. Then you set the EPAP over here in your PEEP. Then you'll set your O2 percentage again to 100% to start with, and then your high pressure limit, you want it to be just above the combined amounts. Okay, so next let's start talking about some settings. So this, and you'll notice it's a fairly bad image of this. That's because it's laminated and I had to get it from a weird angle not to get a glare. But this is a sheet that is hanging off of the ventilator in the ER. It is baseline settings where if you put these settings in, you won't kill anybody. Okay? It'll work. And then you can tweak them from here, but this is your starting settings, okay? And you just go from top to bottom mode. You can do assist control or SIMV like we talked about. You are going to want to set your tidal volume, assuming you're in volume mode. This is for volume mode, not pressure mode. For volume mode, 6 to 8 milliliters per kilogram, and then this is the important part, of ideal body weight. This is not the patient's weight. Okay, I'm a big guy. I weigh about 150 kilos. However, if you give me enough volume for a 150 kilo person, you will pop my lungs. So you need to do the calculation. Luckily, Tony's gone ahead and put the calculation right here. So for males, you take 106 pounds plus 6 pounds for each inch over 60 inches, which is 5 feet tall. So me at 5'8", I get 106 plus 6, 8 times. And then we divide that by the 2.2 to turn it into kilograms. For females, it's 105, and then it's 5 pounds for each inch over 60 pounds. That's your ideal body weight. Okay. Your rate, you're going to set it between 12 and 20. This will depend entirely on what's going on with the patient. You kind of want to match what their natural rate should be, with the exception of patients who are hypercapnic, meaning that they have a high CO2 level. Your COPDers and your asthmatics who have a high CO2 level, if you're putting them on the vent, you're actually going to need to bump their rate up a little bit so you can breathe off some of that CO2, but be careful that you don't hyperventilate them and breathe off too much. This is where you're definitely going to want to have some capno hooked into the vent, okay? Capnography. Then you're going to set your PEEP, generally starting between 5 and 8. I usually start mine at 5, unless it's a CHF patient or a patient with fluid, pulmonary edema. Then I'll set it higher towards the 8. And then you can adjust. FiO2 started at 100% and then titrate down just to keep you in the mid-90s. Pressure support, you generally are going to start between 8 and 15. It depends. Again, higher pressures for pulmonary edema usually, although pulmonary edema will benefit more from PEEP than pressure support. Okay, combined PEEP and pressure support, you don't usually want to get above 25 to 30. Okay, that's where you start getting to dangerous. Okay, and then for your flow trigger, this is not a setting that's actually readily available on ours. So yeah, and then set your, as we talked about if I can go back a screen, set your sensitivity here. I think that's what he's talking about with flow trigger, usually at 2 to 3. Okay. Then for NPPV settings, or NIPPV settings, here we've got our IPAP. Okay, IPAP is determined by setting a pressure support value and a PEEP value. Pressure support is at 10, PEEP is at 5. That means they're getting 15 when they breathe in and 5 when they breathe out. Okay, EPAP, it's just the PEEP. They're the same thing. And then FiO2, 100% to start with, and then titrate it on down. And then flow trigger again, 2 to 3. If you find that they're having a hard, like if they're taking shallow breaths in and the machine's not triggering a breath, like they're taking a super shallow breath and it doesn't notice that they took it and it doesn't help them, then you may have to turn it down so that they have to pull less force in order to trigger the machine. If, however, they are fidgety and like them moving keeps causing it to, trigger a breath, then you may need to turn it up so that they have to pull a little bit more. But don't turn it up too high because then they're going to have to work too hard to get these breaths in. I usually like to keep it between 2 and 5 at the most, but usually 2 to 3. Then for your infants, I'm going to go over this just real quick, but again, this is hanging off of the vent. So if you need it, it's there. Okay. For normal lungs, you're going to do 6 to 7 mils per kilo. Again, this is going to be off of your ideal body weight. And in fact, here, let me go back. Okay. For those of you that don't know how to calculate the ideal body weight of a child, it's pretty simple. For a male or a female, you do this exact same formula, but for every inch below 60 inches, you just subtract 6 pounds, or it's even easier. You take the Broslow tape and you find out what color they are, because that'll tell you what the weight is. Okay. Then if they have diffuse alveolar disease, okay, you only give them 3 to 5. All right. For ventilator settings, generally with a PIP also. and I didn't mention this, when you very first turn on the machine, it's going to ask you if you want to do same patient or new patient. Always do new patient. And then it's going to ask you infant, child, adult. Okay, so you'll just set those according to your patient. And then your PIP on your pressure control for a kid, you want 18 to 25. Okay, and then here are just settings for the various age groups. It's pretty self-explanatory. You'll see that like newborns get less PEEP because their lungs are a little more pliable. So, and then their inspiratory times, you want to be a little bit less because they breathe faster. Their rates are also higher because their natural breathing rate is higher. Okay, and then he's got a couple of notes down here. Avoid peak airway pressures of over 30. Like I said, 25 to 30 is the highest you should ever have a setting, like PEEP and pressure support combined. If you're getting pressures above 30, then we're talking about like pneumo-causing pressures. There is one exception to this rule. Okay, you're going to see pressures higher than 30 when CPR is being performed. It just is what it is. You can't avoid that. The act of doing CPR, and especially the act of doing CPR with a Lucas, will cause pressures above 30. And then he also has the note, if the patient's breathing spontaneous, you should use SIMV. Okay. If you have any questions at all with the vents, please don't hesitate to reach out. Tony in respiratory is, of course, the actual expert on all of this. I'm just helping him out by making this quick little video about how to actually operate the vents, because I'm familiar with actually operating the vents. But if you have questions about the disease processes and actual respiratory treatment, Tony's your expert. There's his email. There's also my email if you have any questions at all for me. I'll be in the ER, of course. Stick around now. I'm going to show some video and talk over where I'm actually operating the vent. It's going to show you all the same stuff that we just went over. And, well, I'll see you guys around the ER. Alright, so here I am turning on the vent. And I will note that the you're gonna go ahead and have me selecting new patient. You'll see all these letter numbers are flashing. It doesn't do that in real life. That's just a result of the camera. You're gonna go pick adult and hit select. The vent is now operational at its default settings. Okay. So next up, let's see what buttons I hit. So first off, we're going to select between volume and pressure. Okay. You'll see you'll have to click it twice to get to pressure. Now to switch from assist control to SIMV. Again, you have to hit it twice. Everything has to be confirmed on this vent. It won't just let you go willy-nilly. Now we're going to switch it over to NPPV, or BiPAP. And it's going to say set IPAP, which you do here in the pressure support setting. And I set it at 10. Then you want to set the EPAP over here in the PEEP. And there we go. It's now operating in NPPV mode. And we're going to go ahead and go back to assist control mode. Now I'm going to toggle through some of the other settings here. So breath rate, it's pretty simple. It's breaths per minute. Pressure control. Okay. Remember, your ultimate pressure is pressure support or pressure control plus PEEP. And whether it's pressure control or pressure support will depend on your setting. And you can see up here in the top, you can see the pressures I've got going on. Okay, so currently my pressure control is set at 13 and my PEEP is set at 7. And you'll see that we're maxing out at 20. Again, the combination. So there, I just turned my oxygen level down to 21 so that the vent wasn't drawing oxygen out of the system. No need to waste the oxygen. 21% is room air, so it's just drawing in room air now. You can see the sensitivity level there I just changed down to 2. Again, that's usually where I like to keep it. Now, there is a manual breath button here. Okay, so for instance, if you need to listen to breath sounds, you can hit the manual breath button. There is also this hold, inspiratory, expiratory hold button. This allows you for, like, a chest x-ray. It allows you to hold the breath when they take a breath in, okay? Not a button you're going to use very often, but it's there if you need it, okay? Control lock there. Locks the controls. We're not really going to use it because we're not using it in an inpatient ventilated setting, at least not right now. There you can see I put my high pressure limit at 30, which is 10 above my current pressures of 20. And then I'm putting my low pressure at 10. Now this is one area where I was actually confused until I talked with Tony. I thought the pressure would have to be set below my PEEP level, but turns out it's below the combined pressure level. So currently my combined pressure level is set at 20. So there I just set my high pressure limit at 25 and low pressure at 15. Gives me 5 centimeters of water on either side for a buffer. And there you go. I just unplugged the vent and it's saying low pressure patient disconnect because there is no more PEEP in there. And I just plugged the vent back in. You will see that next to the alarms there's the silence button. That's also how you reset the alarms. Like once you fix something, reset it to see if it triggers again. Okay, there we just switched back over into volume mode. And it's giving me high pressures because I have a tidal volume of 500 set. It's giving more pressure than what I previously had set. So therefore, my limits either need to go up or my tidal volume needs to come down. There we go, I just changed it to 400. Now the lung that I'm currently using, the fake lung, the training lung I'm using currently at the moment, has a max of like 800 mils. So it's a fairly small volume. But then again, humans are a lot less volume in their lungs than you would expect. You can see there I just turned my pressure limit back up to 30, turned my volume down to 400, and now we're getting peak pressures of about 27. Your IDE ratio is the ratio of inspiratory and expiratory time. 1 to 4 means 4 times expiring to 1 time in. Here's your V calc. This is your volume calculation again. 4 liters a minute. Your PIP currently is sitting about 26. That is the bar up at the top. MAP is your mean airway pressure. PEEP is how we set it at 5. F is just your rate. We've got it set at 15, but if your patient's breathing more than 15, you can see how fast they are breathing. And then here on VTE, you can see how many milliliters per breath are exhaled, excuse me. And you can see here our IDE ratios before. That means inspiration time will be 1 part, expiration 4 parts.